Recently, leaked documents revealed that Canada outright refuses to meet NATO's budget target of 2%, something that has put the Trudeau administration on blast and could risk Canada losing its leverage in NATO's command structure. Justin Trudeau didn't hide this information, however, as he's come out and defended Canada's stance as being a matter of cultural differences and view of necessity, but this hasn't prevented other members from criticizing them and putting into question what Canada can really offer the alliance. And as we'll find out in today's video, Canada hasn't been meeting the 2% target for quite some time, which is also why some view their military as underfunded and unprepared. But it wasn't always like this, as Canada was a founding member of NATO and was proactive in the alliance, so to find out what changed and if Canada is actually lagging behind, stay tuned to Profit Protection. So what's a better place to start than in 1949? World War II just ended and peace was achieved. Tensions couldn't possibly rise after 5 grueling years of war, right? Well, wrong, because even though the Allies teamed up with their ideological rival, the Soviet Union, it was apparent that it was done out of desperation and not the power of friendship. Now, as a budding nation, Canada had proved itself in both world wars as a fierce and competent ally, so when the United States decided to make the anti-communist club, or NATO, Canada was definitely in. They helped write the 14 articles, and they were very proactive when it came to promoting the alliance as not just a defense pact, but as an opportunity to encourage economic and political ties. Moreover, in the 1950s, the spending budget seemed reasonable and there was not much debate over how much should be invested in the military overall. However, when a very prominent Canadian Prime Minister by the name of Lester B. Pearson and his Liberal Party was elected, things started to change. They promised to complete Canada's social safety net, expand pensions, and add a public healthcare system, all of which shifted the government's priorities, limiting how much they were willing to spend on the military. This isn't to say that Canada didn't still play a huge role in NATO's missions globally, as Pearson, for one, was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize for helping to resolve the Suez Crisis, but it's kind of like that picture of the guy walking with his girlfriend but looking at another girl walking by. They're loyal, but you know, it doesn't hurt. Anyways, Canada got even more distance from NATO when another Liberal PM took office. This guy you should probably be familiar with, Pierre Trudeau. Yes, Papa Trudeau. So like in our Macron video, he also thought his country should focus on itself and look out for its own interests. I guess it's gotta be like a French thing or something. Trudeau argued that Europe no longer needed Canadian might to defend it, and Canadian prioritization of NATO fell even further down the list. So I think you get the picture. Canada saw NATO as less of a priority as the world arguably became safer and domestic policies like healthcare took up much more of the budget. For the past few decades, Canada has carried itself as a peacekeeping nation, but Michael Goodspeed from the Toronto Star argues that this is just a facade that has deluded people into thinking Canada's military isn't already straining itself to partake in these efforts. NATO's military exercises in the Baltics have exposed this as well, as a CBC article writes that Canada is 7,600 members short of full strength, so it hasn't partaken in these exercises in the way NATO would like. Not many people are signing up to join the military, and can you even blame them? They're not given enough support from the government for one, and the pay also isn't worth it. 10 years ago, Canada made an effort to revamp its military, but it still hasn't received some of the equipment to this day. Why? Well, because former PM Stephen Harper cancelled an order of 108 close combat vehicles because the Chief of Defense at the time said, and I quote, "Canadian armed forces do not procure capabilities unless they're absolutely necessary to the attainment of our mandate," meaning the government will not expand military spending unless things get bad. And you might wonder why numerous administrations over the past 10 years have maintained this stance on military spending. Well, this is just my opinion as a Canadian, but why should they? The United States calls the shots whether or not NATO likes it, and being an immediate neighbor, it's kinda hard to imagine a reality where the US wouldn't fight tooth and nail to defend Canada, and it's not like the US can just leave NATO if they don't like things, so there's no reason for Canada to feel inclined to ramp up military spending. But an article from theconversation.com brings up 3 interesting points as to why Canadians themselves don't really care about ramping up their military. The first is cultural concerns within the military. With poor salaries and a sex scandal under its belt, that's enough to dissuade anyone from really finding themselves amongst the ranks. Granted, there are still people signing up, but it's only half the amount that's really needed. So number 2 is little strategic thinking. As the author of this article states, people graduating from the Canadian Forces College don't really work in the areas they're educated in. So just about what every college graduate experiences, which means that there's a lot of shifting around in the military ranks and departments in an attempt for these people to get the position they actually want. And lastly is just a lack of interest in defense. Considering what I've already mentioned about NATO, the sheer size and geographical location of Canada is enough for Canadians to not feel pressured by any threats. For most of its history, Canada hasn't had anyone threaten to attack them, nor have they given anyone any reason to, for the most part. So perhaps Canada's biggest strength is also the cause of their weakness and lack of accountability for their own safety because of the assumption that we're nice, who would want to attack us? But even though Canada isn't meeting its 2% budgetary target, it's still the 6th highest spending NATO member, so what gives? Well, it all comes down to GDP. For example, Canada has a GDP nearing 2 trillion, meanwhile the UK has a GDP of 3 trillion, Germany just over 4, so 2% of their budget would be different from Canada's 2%. As for the percentage that Canada is allocating for budget, it sits at roughly 1.29% or about $26 billion. Meanwhile, a country like Greece spends 3.54% or $8 billion on its military, which really puts things into perspective. So you might think, with $27 billion, where is that money even going? Canada currently possesses the 27th strongest military in the world, but still ranks lower than, say, Pakistan, who spends $18 billion on its resources and is in 7th place. It's a head-scratcher to say the least. And it's hard to say for sure, but the Canadian government has an everlasting problem with procuring armaments and equipment in a timely manner, according to a Globe and Mail article. Case in point, Harper cancelling an order of 108 combat vehicles, as well as an order of 88 F-35 jets that has been sitting on a shelf somewhere in the Canadian Parliament since 2010. The issue here is mainly an understaffed and outdated Canadian military that is yearning for equipment that has been a long time coming. However, Canada isn't the only country not to hit NATO's 2% budgetary target. As a matter of fact, there are 21 more members in the alliance that also aren't pulling their weight for one reason or another. Hell, both Germany and France also aren't spending the necessary amounts. For Germany, bureaucratic hurdles including lengthy approval processes and other obstacles are hindering efforts to modernize its military. These challenges have led to delays, cost overruns, and negatively impacted Germany's military readiness, along with a lack of strategic vision for its military. Meanwhile, France's top military commanders have expressed their concerns about the state of their troops in a letter, citing issues with lack of funding, resources, and personnel, as well as problems with overwork, stress, and low pay affecting the mental health and morale of troops. So what conclusion can we draw from all of this? I think it comes down to the fact that because America spends so much on its military, more than every NATO member combined in fact, other countries most likely don't feel pressured to meet that 2% target. Nevertheless, since we're focusing on Canada, there are a few things it can do to contribute more to NATO. Paul T. Mitchell of The Conversation says, in order to address these issues, Canada needs to develop a more strategic culture that prioritizes defense and that engages the public in a meaningful way. This could involve initiatives such as increased investment in defense education, greater public engagement with defense issues, and a more transparent and accountable defense procurement process. Overall, the article argues that Canada's defense issues are not simply a matter of funding, but of broader cultural factors that need to be addressed in order to develop a more coherent and effective defense policy. It's not an easy task whatsoever, and perhaps impossible in a country that prides itself on being different from the US. I don't really need sources for that, so I can definitely say that Canadians enjoy free healthcare and being the nice one in the global community, meaning that by increasing military spending, Canadians would feel that they are becoming more American, even though we practically are anyways. But that's all for me today and us at Profit Protection. I hope you enjoyed the video and learned something about the Great White North that you might not have known. You might also want to watch our video on Peter Zeihan's thoughts on a potential nuclear war in the event that Ukraine loses to Russia. At any rate, make sure to subscribe to the channel so we can bring you more videos like this, and don't forget to show your support. As for now, take it easy and I'll catch you in the next one.